Okay, we saw the Reykjavík Index, which is a very good measurement on what is happening, and we don't like what we're seeing. So now we have, as Hannah discussed, the 4 E's, the action. We need to move from information to action. So equal pay, equal representation, equal parental leave, and ending gender-based violence. And this is all what we also heard in the discussion with the Icelandic politicians, my former colleagues. And this has worked here in Iceland to emphasize these issues, but it's not enough, as you also heard. So, starting with you, Michelle, going from the data to the action, what do you see as the sort of easy wins for governments? What do you see and institutions to combat these trends that we're seeing in the index? We don't want 300 years. We don't want 180 years. What are the easy wins that you, from your expertise, can tell us?
So I'm going to be realistic that I don't think anything about this is easy, but I think if you look at the speed at which we're seeing change in the way we don't want it, we have to believe that we can turn it around just as quick. And I think there are a couple of things that are very important to me from the data, and they're not actually so much to do with government, but to do with other stakeholders. I think we need to be really much more careful in the corporate world, and I work in the corporate world, to ensure that all of the achievements that have been made to make corporations fairer places, that the way that they're talked about, don't make it sound like there's a group of young men who are now not going to be able to thrive. We need to change our language to be inclusive, which isn't just about including groups who have previously experienced prejudice, but ensuring that our young men still feel right at the heart of that. So I think, yeah, that would be one of my first priorities. But secondly, I think we have to be much more clear on calling out the bad actors who are targeting our young people publicly and going after that in a public way.
To make sure that we don't, that our young people and our young boys and men don't see gender equality as a threat to their existence. That is your first point, right?
Absolutely. And if you think about, we left Reykjavik last year, and I think it's important to ask ourselves, how many of us were deeply familiar with Andrew Tate? And some of this stuff became a bit of a surprise because we've been not sitting in the space where this has been going on and where our children and young people have been targeted by misogynist propaganda.
Yeah. Very important. Christy, moving to you. From your point of view, where do you see or what are the most adoptable? Katrin Jakobsdóttir said we have to keep the fire burning. The most adoptable, high-impact solutions that you would like to see implemented to achieve the Reykjavik action items, the 4 E's?
Well, we've set big goals, and I think the number one thing that we need, as opposed to getting into specific policies and legislation, is a sense of urgency. So we have to, first of all, collaborate together. There's a lot of power in this room, and I think we need to recognize how much power we have to create this change. I'm not trying to be Pollyanna-ish about it, but sometimes in the context of our daily lives, we think, well, I'm not the most powerful person in my organization. There's still gender bias, et cetera, but the fact is, regardless of that, we all have a lot more power than 99.9% of the people in this world. And we need to use our privilege and our status and our power to make a sense of urgency around the 4 E's. And remember, equal pay, equal representation, equal parental leave, and ending gender-based violence are achievable goals. They have been achieved elsewhere. And so I think I don't want to sound unrealistic, but we have to believe that we can do it.
I think Áslaug Arna Sigurbjörnsdóttir, the Minister of Higher Education, she nailed it when she said, if we are running the marathon and don't keep going, the others are going to slow down as well. I
think that's a great analogy, and I heard that and I thought, you know what, okay, we are in a marathon. We may be in like 2,000 years of a marathon if you think about, I don't know, that where certain history started. But But sometimes in a marathon, you sprint.
Yep.
And we have to stay ahead of where we've been.
So let's all tie our shoes and start running faster.
I have run 2 marathons, so I'm just saying, I'm not fast, but I completed them.
But now you're going to do it in under what?
Well, I just want to finish.
We are all going to ask her next year whether she ran another marathon. But Lopa, you come from the UN, and in your work in the Generation Equality Forum and as the director of the Civil Society Division at the UN Women, you know what it takes to build meaningful partnerships. So if you look at the greatest challenges you see to implement the Reykjavik action items and to move forward, how can partnerships, how can all of us here in the room help to achieve it?
If you look at the 4 E's, equal representation, equal pay, equal parental leave, and ending gender-based violence, all of this is crucially dependent on norm and culture change. How do people, how do communities, how do young people look at women who are in leadership positions and women in all their diversity who are in leadership positions? How do they look at it? And therefore, when you're looking at what are some of the biggest challenges, it is how do we change hearts and minds? How do we change the norms, the cultures, the standards, the values that communities hold in order to be able to make these changes and address these 4 E's, these 4 action items? So the first is that deep, meaningful and effective work around norm and culture change. That includes, for example, gender transformative education. If we do not change the way people think in classrooms, in families, in communities, so looking at education as one of the salient policy spaces and places where stakeholders come together. So partnerships built around delivering gender transformative education outcomes. That's one big, big area. The investments required, the policy sustainability required, the political will required, and the partnerships required to deliver that. Mm-hmm. Number 2, the work with deep, meaningful and effective work with men and boys. This is absolutely crucial. Men and boys to take on the accountability and the responsibility for breaking and changing and transforming stereotypes. Mm-hmm. Men in power to be able to take on the responsibility for ceding space to women in power, to be able to share space with women in power. And fundamentally, of course, the deep work with men and boys to understand that gender equality is an all of society issue. It's not just about changing the lives of women and girls. If a society is gender equal, it is prosperity for the entire society. And my final point is around deep, meaningful, and important work with media. Media are culture creators. Media uphold role models and the ways in which cultural norms are upheld. So the really important work necessary, both in terms of policy as well as in terms of partnerships, to work with media as leaders, mm-hmm. as culture creators, and as norm upholders, to change this fundamental culture around how women are perceived as leaders.
Thank you. I think you bring up very many important points. And I'm the director of the OECD Development Center, where we publish the Social Institutions and Gender Index, the SIGI, which measures exactly what you're talking about, the norms. How do you change the norms? How do you make sure that women and girls are educated equally? And that doesn't happen, for example, if you allow child marriage and a girl married at 13, pregnant at 14, and you're not allowed to come to school when you're pregnant. So that girl's path to becoming a president is harder than elsewhere. the same thing you say about the men and boys. We're also doing work on masculinities, and we'll be discussing that at a leaders' talk. It is essential to bring them into this conversation. But now, because we're running out of time, I'm going to give each one of you the same question. 1 minute answer. If you had the magic wand, if you could do whatever, and right after you swipe your magic wand, things are going to get better. Michelle, what would you do?
Protect younger children in the classroom and then see ahead to where they become vulnerable to different forces on social media and find some way of preparing them for that.
That was not even 1 minute. Thank you. Lopa.
The political will and the investments necessary to build the partnerships that are going to be delivering this, to invest in stakeholder partnerships that are going to be delivering this.
Very good. Christy, you
had
even have a minute and a half.
Well, okay, well, I have so many wishes, but I think my wish would be to extract the judgment of likability from people who might advocate for the 4 E's, because some people aren't going to like hearing this, and my magic wand would not allow anybody to say, when you're sharing your opinion, when you're asking for what you deserve, that somehow makes you unlikable and therefore undeserving.
Mm-hmm. Very good. As Hannah said when she was introducing the 4 E's, the action items, this is something that has been tried. A lot of this has been tried here in Iceland, and maybe to close this excellent session, and I want to thank all of you for your valuable insights. And I don't want to sound, because I'm Icelandic, I don't want to sound like we are gloating or bragging, because we're not. We are, as the 100,000 people who came to strike, they demonstrated that we are not happy. We want more. But there are ways and policies and measures and legislation that have been proven to work here. And I want to mention the parental leave, particularly. Had the pleasure of working on that back in the day, and that is, you see the difference in culture, and now it's 20 years plus in, and you see the difference. You see the importance of men being there, fathers being there from the very start in changing society. So I wanna leave us with the thought that with the action items, and I encourage all of you to join us in the journey in advocating them and be loud and proud, and let's take action. Enough talking, let's keep the fire burning, as the Prime Minister said. Thank you, Christy, Lopa, Michelle, Christy, Lopa.
Thank you.
And
Thank you,
please
Michelle.
give these fantastic women a round of applause.